Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast and the Smart Connector group. It's Thursday evening. I'm live here in the UK and I have such an exciting guest for you as ever. Allison Williams. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you, Jane, for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you.
Yeah, me too. So, Allison is founder of Williams Law Group and she's known as the Law Group Mentor. And she took Williams Law Group, which is her law firm, from startup to a multi-million dollar business in 3.5 years. And with her law firm mentor offer, she teaches other lawyers how to do the same. And she's won the Law Firm 500 award in the US. She's been ranked the 14th fastest growing law firm in the USA. She's been named a Stevie Award Finalist for Female Entrepreneur of the Year. And she's been voted as NJBIZ top 50 women in business and designated one of the top 25 leading women entrepreneurs and business owners. So we are so privileged to have her on the show tonight. And as I said, it's really, really exciting to have you here, Allison.
Well, it's really exciting to be here with you, Jane. I know that you have quite the esteemed career in business growth, and so that's something we both kind of veg out on. So happy to dive into a discussion with you about it.
Yeah, because we were chatting beforehand, and I was saying, I also I was managing director of a very fast growth business myself, which grew from 1 to 6 million in 2 years, which is kind of quite a very, very steep learning curve and a growth curve as well before selling out to US Communications Group into public. So, we have that in common. We've both been taken this relatively fledgling business to a very fast growth trajectory. And so a lot of my audience want to know, how do you actually do that? How do you go from those early days when you've got some form of professional service that you offer? So for us, it was brand consultancy. That was a thing that we did. For you, obviously, it's legal services, and you specifically specialize in family law, don't you? That was your thing, Allison. So so we're just going to get into it, and tell us about your journey then. You founded this business, and so you had it from startup, so pre-revenue. How did that all come about? How did you come to start your own law firm?
Yeah, so it's interesting. A lot of lawyers they don't like being an employee. They decide that they want to stake out and have their own space in the world. And I wasn't really that person. I loved the place that I worked. I loved the people that I worked with. But what I found was that I had grown as much as I could there. And when I asked for help and I said, I'm bringing in so much work, I can't get to it all. My boss decided that he would hire someone. But when the topic came up, I said, if you're expecting me to train this person, develop this person, spend my nights and weekends laboring over the mistakes that they make, making sure that they are doing everything to be a great attorney, I expect a title. And so he went to his partners and he came back to me and said, I think it's a great idea and I'm working on the team. And I just got a little offended by that. I said, I'm bringing you $500,000 at that point in my own book of business. And I said, I think I'm done. So I left. And me and my 43 clients, we went down the street and stuck out on our own. And I very quickly learned that even though I knew a lot about the logistics of my practice, I didn't understand how to codify that into a business. I didn't understand how to systematize everything contemporaneously with doing the work, contemporaneously with hiring the people, contemporaneously with organizing the infrastructure. And it very quickly became too much for me. I actually ended up having a near-death experience when I fell asleep driving after a multitude of 90-hour work weeks. And at that point, I said, this stuff's for the birds. So I went and got myself a job, but I didn't accept the offer. It was a very lucrative offer, but I declined it at the last minute and said, something called me to start this business. I'm going to see it through. And the only way that I could do that is by getting the assistance of coaches. So started working with coaches, very quickly got myself under control, started adding people, adding traction. And, very soon after only 3.5 years, we were able to scale from startup to a multi-million-dollar business. And now that business requires very little of my time.
Wow, that is an amazing story. And, I think what's very significant is that you got to this really quite unhealthy place. I mean, that must have been a horribly scary experience and a horrible wake-up call in a way, falling asleep at the wheel. And those 90-hour weeks, that is no fun at all, right? But it's interesting that once you made the decision to get somebody into your business, get some coaches, get some external help and so on, that's when it took off. And I think that's the kind of interesting thing, because we humans, we always think we're invincible, don't we? We think we don't need help. And then, something happens, we crash and burn, and then we're humbled, aren't we? Is that what happened to you?
Yeah, for the most part, it was, I think I always understood the value of hiring people, right? I knew that I needed to hire people, but I was really bad at it.
Well,
I will just own that now. I very much approached it as a perspective of, if someone puts themselves out there as being a fill in the blank role, secretary, paralegal, attorney, whatever, and I ask them, can you do the job? And they say, yes, I should believe them. And then they'll come in, they'll do the job, and life will be but a dream. But of course, we know that that's not the case. We know that there's a lot more that goes into hiring people. And I also fundamentally believe that if I hired the right people and I left them to their own devices, because I was always someone who was a figure it out kind of person. I like the challenge of doing things myself. And I like to, kind of be the master of my own destiny. And I was very lucky that I had always found places that allowed me to do that. So I had to work within a system, but I generally was able to figure out lawyering on my own. And so when I hired people, I expected that I could give them the same thing. I would give them the freedom that I craved, and they would similarly reciprocate by being exceptional at what they do. And that's, of course, not what happens, right? There's an entrepreneur's mind and there's an employee's mind, and they're not the same. And employees, no matter how exceptional they are, typically are going to need some form of structure, some form of training, some form of development, positive motivation, and a culture that allows them to be their best selves. And I didn't know that until I knew that. So there was a lot of kind of learning by my own mistakes. And I really decided to start my second business, Law Firm Mentor, because I wanted people to have the beauty of creating that without all the trauma that goes with making all the mistakes at the forefront. Instead, go in with a plan, know generally what you need to do, and then have some guidance to help you get there easier.
That makes a lot of sense, because it is very, very difficult to make that transition, isn't it? From even being in a very senior role in a business that is not your business to founding your own business. And then all of a sudden you are responsible for all of those aspects that you mentioned, hiring, culture, motivation, rewards, all of those things that you can take for granted when you've been in an environment where that's actually provided for you, whether it's done well or badly. So it's fascinating, isn't it? Really, really fascinating topic. Okay, so Allison, before we get on to the business growth, because that's such an interesting topic, let's just talk about family law, because that's your background and that's your history. So what is it that you've learned about people as a result of your long career in family law?
Oh, wow. That's a very good question. I haven't ever had someone ask me that. So I would say what probably sticks out to me about people that I've learned through being a family law practitioner is just the overwhelming capacity of people to overcome themselves through the process of challenge. And specifically in my area of family law, I did everything, but I wasn't a generalist. I was really very focused on the area of child abuse and neglect parental representation. So I represented people accused of child abuse and more often than not, child neglect. And that typically came in the form of people who had substance abuse issues, mental health challenges. They oftentimes were income constrained. And I did all of that work through my own personal marketing. I didn't work through the state, the government. I was compensated by the people. And so what I found is that people always had a sense of themselves and their strengths and their weaknesses, but it took someone believing in them for them to see in themselves the ability to overcome the challenge that led to the state's involvement. And that
Wow.
was usually me. And so when I would meet with a client, I was a very aggressive litigator. I was very intimidating in a courtroom. That was kind of what I was known for. But people would be surprised that they'd meet me in my office. And, you know, that would be the space where they got to cry and the space where they got to acknowledge where they were falling short. And I didn't blame them or judge them. And just having the ability to own your stuff without having someone look down at you or point your finger at you allowed people to really make positive changes. So I was really a change agent in a way that I wasn't
Wow.
expecting through my career. And that very easily tied into my career as a business coach, because when I talk to people about what's going wrong in their business, there's a lot of strategy, tactical, brass tacks. You need to do X and not Y. But more than anything, at the core of it is you have to evolve as a person, and people don't feel inclined to do that until they feel free to do that in a space where someone is not judging them, but is looking at them candidly and pointing out how they can be better.
Wow, that's really, really amazing. You know, I just can't even imagine the transformation that you will have had in some of those people's lives, you know, just coming in at that really critical time where, you know, things have gone obviously very badly wrong. And then you're there not just as an expert and somebody who can help them, but somebody who is also, as you said, a non-judgmental, you know, sort of listener and supporter as well. It's really amazing. It must have been very fulfilling for you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's one of the things that I personally have had my own struggles with mental health. I was very severely depressed at one point in my life. And I remember talking to my therapist and saying to her, you know, she asked me, she's like, how can you do this like day in and day out? Because I was telling her about some of the difficulties of my work. And I said, you know, I think it's a calling. You know, I don't believe that I have a choice over doing this work. I think I was chosen for this.
Yeah.
And really, I think we oftentimes find ourselves doing work in life, whatever that work is, that we don't understand how we fell into it. We have a story, right? You know, John Doe introduced me to Susie Smith, and next thing you know, we had a conversation, and now I do this.
Yeah.
But there's a reason, there's a choice, and there's something in that work that you do that is leading you to learn something about yourself, be something more than you are right now through
Mhm.
whatever it is, whether you work in a factory or you work on an assembly line or you work with people. And so I believe that the work that I do was actually something that formed me into a better person and caused me to continue to want to help other people to be better just because I had that experience.
Mm. And I think sometimes we have to go through pain in order to truly empathize with the challenges of others, because otherwise, how would we be able to bridge that gap? I think it's very, very important for us to, you know, if we're helping other people, if we're supporting other people, to really have a background where that is meaningful, because otherwise, you know, it's almost like voyeurism, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So let's get on to the business growth topic then, Alison. So you founded this law firm. You took the clients because you weren't being recognized and rewarded. In terms of where you are right now, we've got, okay, somebody is saying, I'm only seeing Facebook user at the moment because they didn't pre-register, but it says, yes, want to create own business. Okay, great. Well, you're in the right place, a Facebook user. Okay, so let's talk about it and get really analytical, deep dive. Okay, so you decided to stick with it. You had all these teething problems and challenges, and then you almost left. You almost went back into employment. You decided to come back into it. What happened next?
Well, Well, there was a lot that happened next. The first thing was, like I said, I started looking for coaches. I didn't know that was the industry I was looking for. I was really just saying, how can I grow a business, right? How can I get my business to run better? So I searched around and found a company. And through that company, I started working with a series of coaches and then ultimately got into the hands of others. But it really kind of boiled down to the basics, right? Everyone has something that they need as kind of the focal point, but everyone needs to master their marketing and their sales so that they have enough money coming in.
True.
And their people and their systems so that business ultimately doesn't require all of your time in order to produce.
Yes.
So I knew that those were kind of the 4 pillars of success that I needed to optimize. And from there, it was really that I had to focus first on getting myself more time because I was working too much. So that was really about kind of the thing that now is the soul of Law Firm Mentor, which is crushing chaos. And it is through creating systems. Mm-hmm. And I started the work of systematizing everything in my business. There was a system for all of the mundane things that have to happen, like answering the phone and paying the bills. Yeah. But there's also a system for how we market, a system for how we measure our financial success, a system for how we measure productivity of every person from the file clerk to the associate attorney to the marketing team, right? There's nothing that happens in business that is random or that is in the discretion of an individual. Everything is done by a process. And I created very early on a culture around creating systems so that it wasn't me writing down everything that needed to happen. If I hired a secretary and I said, I need a secretary, you have 20 years of experience, you know a lot more about being a secretary than I do. I need you to document what you're doing. And I need you to use this formula for documenting all of the things, including what you're doing, why you're doing it a certain way, how you're going to effectively get it done quickly, and how we can operationalize it to fit with other roles in the company. And doing that very quickly got me to a place where I had room to breathe. So we had to get from 90 hours down to first 60 hours and then down to 40 hours to have a quality of life that would allow me to get adequate sleep, adequate nutrition, and start to rebuild my self-esteem, honestly, because that accident really kind of shook me up. And then from there, once I kind of got the systems, I recognized that the people had to run the system. So I had to get the right kind of people. And it took me probably a good 3 or 4 years before I mastered the art of hiring for the company rather than hiring to work with me. Mm-hmm. So even though people would come into my company and they would work for me, I'm the boss, they wouldn't necessarily work with me. I needed people that would be effective at their role. So I got very keen on using assessments so that I wasn't just hearing what they had to say and getting behavioral interview questions down, but I was also looking under the hood, right? How does this person manage themselves? How do they manage others? How do they manage team? How is this person going to think when I'm not there? And I needed to have the right kind of people in each of the roles, right? You can have a very singular, isolated personality type, very introverted in some roles, but not others, right? I want an extrovert on the phone talking to my prospects so that person can engage them to get them inclined to schedule an appointment versus somebody who's in the back, who's organizing the data, right? Or creating paper systems or filing things. That person probably would work better to be an introvert and better to have their own enjoyment out of being with themselves and not need social interaction as much. So it really was an art to kind of figure out who should be doing the work and how. And once we got that under control, then we moved over to marketing and sales, which I already had a knack for, but we had to dial it in. I had to teach it to other people so that we could bring in more money consistently.
Yeah, and all of that makes so much sense to me because you cannot grow without systems, right? Because otherwise you just get chaos. And, chaos leads to inefficiency. It drives down profits. It makes people really unhappy, doesn't it? Because people actually love to know where they stand. And that's the thing about systems is that it also contributes to culture, doesn't it? Because if people feel as though, well, that's the way that things are done around here, it creates a sense of certainty and safety. Whereas if they, in my experience anyway, because obviously I come from a creative background, so I've seen lots of kind of, let's just say, creatively led businesses who didn't value systems in the same way. And I think what happens, it's a bit like having a family where the parents are a bit out of control, and the children step in and they try to kind of, they try to be the adults. And I always used to think that, I always used to think that, with us, we had to, as a business owner, you have to be the parent in a way. You are in a kind of parenting role because you're setting the paradigm, right? Because otherwise it just all becomes, it's too much of a burden and too much of a pressure on those people who are, they don't come to work to be a business owner. They come to work to be an employee and to have the freedom to go home and do their own thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, it'd be really, really fascinating. Okay, so Alison, so you put these processes in place. What happened next?
Well, once we got the processes in place and we started to dial in the people, the next thing I had to really think about, this was really something I should have thought about before, but again, I was kind of starting at a place of chaos, was really thinking about the model that I wanted to create, right?
Mhm.
Did I want to be the business owner, the CEO who was overseeing everything, who was the visionary, who was assembling the right people, who was orchestrating the plans for allocation of resources? Or did I really want to be a technician? Did I want to be the lawyer, boots on the grounds in the courtroom, dealing with the
Mhm.
clients? Or did I want something in between, right? Somewhat managing, but also doing the work and leading the firm. And I had to decide. And that's one of the things that is the most challenging for our clients to
Uh-huh.
understand is a lot of times I think a lot of people, you go into business because you love the thing that is the source of your business, right? If
Yeah.
you're a dressmaker, you go into business because you love making dresses. If you're a lawyer, you go into business because you love lawyering.
Yes.
You want the thing that you are selling to be the focal point, but it really can't be if your business is going to be a true business and not just an entity that has your name on it. And so I had to realize that and I had to pick a lane. And by the time that I started in business, I had so much work that I really had to be the leader of my entity. And I had to get people to do the work with me initially and then eventually for me. So now I've ascended to the role of being just the CEO. If I wanted to go back and take cases, I could re-engineer our financial model as well as our time allocation, our resources, our people to do that. But there has to be a plan for that because the way that you staff up a business where you're going to be doing the work, at least in
Mhm.
part, it's not the same as the way you staff it up if you're going to be partly doing the work and partly delegating the work to someone else.
Yeah. So would you say that decision to kind of step into the CEO role and actually sort of delegate or outsource the practitioner, is that a kind of empire building mentality, would you say?
It is. It definitely is. And it's probably for some people very easy, right? Some people, their business is a way to make money and their business is a way to a lifestyle. For others, their business is their purpose, right? You're
Mhm.
you're doing the work because you feel connected to the work. You feel that the work is a part of your identity.
Mm.
And when you're in the latter category, as I was, it's very challenging to let it go. You almost feel that you are not doing the right thing if you are just the CEO and you're not doing the work anymore. So you really have to work on yourself to kind of figure out not only do I have value outside of my work, but where is my value in this ecosystem? So for a lot of our clients, it's really helping them to see that by virtue of you creating the business, you are helping the people that you desire to help. You may not be the direct person doing the work, right? You might not be building the widget, but you are the reason why they're able to get the benefit of the service that you provide. So you really have a much greater impact, especially when you start scaling your business, because then you're helping that many more people. You're having that much more of a ripple effect of positivity in whatever industry you work in.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting, Alison, and I was just thinking that, I think, as you said, a lot of people that do make this transition and they want to grow a business, obviously, there are very good reasons to do that. And, a lot of people, I see people who say, oh, I would not want to grow a business because, I just wouldn't want to have the responsibility of employees and all of that. But of course, the reason why you want to grow a business is because you don't want to stay down in the trenches forever. And you do want to have that kind of helicopter view and to be able to work less, earn more, and enjoy your life. And if you do it right, that's the impact, isn't it, of that? But along the way, there is this thing about identity, isn't there? And about letting go of an old identity and somehow stepping into your new future self. Do you think that was challenging for you?
Yeah, it was definitely challenging for me. When I started my law firm, I had been a lawyer for 10 years. But I would like to say I probably fit 30 years of lawyering into that 10 years because I was always a workaholic. I very much was highly competitive, highly driven. I wanted to be the best. And by the time I started my law firm, I really was. I mean, I had a statewide reputation. I was one of the few people that handled child abuse and neglect cases outside of the public defender's office or outside of government agency work. I was doing it solely on the private sector. I built the largest law firm dedicated to that practice area in the state of New Jersey. And so by the time I was ready to go out and do it on my own, my ego was associated with my work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there were plenty of great businesses out there where there were plenty of great law firms, there were plenty of big law firms. So I knew I couldn't necessarily compete next to John Doe's law firm that was in business 20 years before me. But I knew at the core of what I offered was the uniqueness of the child abuse practice in the public sector handled by private attorneys, right? And so I knew that in that sense, I was very unique and I was afraid to lose that, frankly. And so there was a lot of inner work that had to be done for me to see that my value is not my labor, right? There's more to me than just what I do for other people. And I also had to recognize that by virtue of the important work that we do, because I do believe that the work that we've always done has been centered on the supportive role of improving families.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, that work is very valuable and very purpose driven. But I also then got to see other people evolve to handle that work as well. So there was a value in mentorship. There was a value in developing people in their legal careers. There was also a value in putting a message out to the world, right? Because even people that couldn't afford us or wouldn't work with us, they got to be empowered by seeing all the successes that we were creating. They got to see that there were resources that were available that they may not know of. They got to learn strategies that we would share with the public about how to defeat erroneous claims made by specious people who were kind of attacking them as opposed to people that had legitimate concerns for the welfare of their children. So there was a greater purpose beyond just doing the work. And I started to see how selfish it was that my ego needed to be the one doing the tactile as opposed to being able to do a lot more when I could step out of the day-to-day.
Yeah, so that's obviously a journey, and that's really, really interesting. And as you said, there must have been like a process to kind of get to that point, because it is also about you evolving yourself and your identity and stepping into that kind of bigger role, that bigger purpose, and that bigger mission. And so in terms of where you are now with your business, Alison, obviously you're sitting on top of two businesses, aren't you? So let's talk about those. So you've still got your law firm, right?
I do.
That's your number one business, right?
That's the first one.
Yes. Okay. And then you have your mentorship business, which helps other law firms expand and grow as well. So in that business, you have some international clients as well as US clients, don't you?
I do.
What are the most common challenges that you see them facing?
So I think at the heart of it, people come to us when they are at some form of breaking point in the way that they're doing things in business, right? So not everyone's breaking point is financial. Some of our clients come in and they're already very financially successful. Many of them are seeking more time. They're wanting either more time in the business to actually do the work, and they feel that there's a lot of kind of scattered, smaller activity that isn't really their zone of genius that's landing on them.
Yeah.
Or they want more time outside of the business, right? They want to be with their family. They want to start another business. They want to not have to work X number of hours to produce a certain amount of income. And so they come to us with unique challenges to kind of where they are. But the universal that I've never met a lawyer that doesn't want this, which is the right composition for them of more money and more time, right?
Mhm.
It's the business owners, Herculean task to create for themselves more money and more time. And what we always focus on is that we help you to do both of those contemporaneously, right? You create more time as you create more money, so that with more time, you could be pouring it back into the business, or you could be pouring it into whatever personal endeavor you have outside of the business. That's your choice. But you don't have to horse trade, right? You don't have to say either I can make more money or I can have more free time. I can't have both. You have to learn the process that we teach of how to create both contemporaneously so that you can have the life that you want.
Yeah, that really is very, very powerful. And as you said, I think it's the holy grail, not just of business sort of owners in the legal profession, but I think anywhere really, any business owner. Most business owners end up working very, very hard in the early days, and it is the holy grail. It's like, how do we get to this place where I'm working less and I'm earning more? It's that big thing, as you said. Okay. So fascinating discussion, Alison. I really am enjoying this. It's just amazing. So, one of the challenges I know that female lawyers have, certainly over here in the UK, and I must admit I don't know many US based attorneys because obviously I'm here, you're just
Mhm.
outside London, but I do know that here in the UK, law is generally a very hard driving profession.
Mhm.
And, I've obviously, having, sold my own business, look, I've had a lot to do with lawyers over the years. And I know that it is often a very punishing environment for women, particularly when they get to the point where, if they have a family or whatever, because all I can say is that some of the male lawyers that I know, they have wives that are very supportive of them, and they're like, yeah, you have to work late, every single night this week. Don't you worry, I'll take care of things at home. It
Mhm.
doesn't really seem to work the other way around. This is what people have told me. And do you think that law is particularly challenging for women because of that, or do you think it just depends?
Well, I think it's a universal truth that women do more domestic labor, whether they are in traditional hypergamous relationships or they are the primary wage earner. It's also true that that discrepancy tends to grow when children are introduced. So that when a woman has a child, whether it's by nature or nurture, we need not resolve that debate today. There is a statistical correlation between more labor in the household and with the child in particular as a result of giving birth than if you had just been in a relationship that may have even started off egalitarian. So I think it is a challenge that is particular to women in heterosexual partnership. Frankly, I can't speak to lesbian relationships or to gay male relationships, but statistically, at least in terms of heterosexual relationships, it's a very common problem. The challenge with lawyering on top of it is that lawyering does require a lot of hours.
Mhm.
And the one thing that I think we have moved to, at least in the US as a culture, I'm hearing little trickles about it being across the world, so I would imagine it's also in the UK, is more of a focus on work-life balance. But the reality is, I, as a consumer, want the best lawyer. I don't want the most balanced lawyer. Right? I would rather hire the lawyer who's the workaholic who has spent all of their time crafting the exceptionalism in their career than being the person who's having a nice 40-hour work week that balances time with their family and etc. Right? And even when people say that they want something to the contrary, what they really want when they hire a lawyer is the greatest chance to win And the
Oh,
more
yeah.
hours you put in, the greater skill set you tend to have created. It's not universal, right? Because at some point there's a law of diminishing returns. So you have to think about the fact that there are just fewer hours that a woman will have available if she, in the midst of, usually that first 10 years is what they say is the most critical time for you developing yourself as a lawyer, if she creates a family. But there are definitely things that the legal profession falls far short on to be able to support women to be able to work those hours. It's not just in the home, it's also the workplace policies that will stop a woman from being able to take time away from the workplace without fearing a loss of career succession.
Yeah.
It also is the way that we interact with each other, right? The assumptions that people make that a man who has a child is now more motivated and a woman who has a child is now less motivated. The
Oh,
way
yeah.
that work is allocated, right? Now you don't get the plum assignments because the assumption will be that you're going to take time away from work for your child, even if you're not inclined to. So
Mhm.
that's part of the reason why we have such a very robust community of women lawyers who own law firms in Law Firm Mentor, because they recognize that if they want to have a life that takes care of all parts of life, not just a strong career and
Yeah.
not just a high income capacity, but also enough time to enjoy the people in their life, you're
Mhm.
going to have to create that for yourself. And the beautiful thing is when you learn how to create that in a way that fosters both time and money, when you're growing both of them, you can arrive at the ascent. You can be at the top of your industry and you can be at the top of your business and still have time for your family if you create it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, that's really, really important point because actually I was watching, I think it was like a YouTube video or something that it was about female kind of high flyers and how many of them quit, just because it just gets too much. And I mean, that was certainly the case for me. I got to this point where my career was really in the ascendant. And, I was flying all over the world and had these two young children. And I just got to the point where, like, this is just, I don't want to have this life. Somebody else is bringing up my children. I'm not seeing them. And everybody around me thought it was great because I don't know, they got kind of payoff from it. Everybody thought I was this real successful kind of high flyer. But when you're miserable inside, it doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't. The money doesn't matter. The glamour doesn't matter. That what other people are thinking about you doesn't matter. What really matters is that, in a way, it's almost superficial to call it work-life balance, but it's really that you are able to fulfill your deepest purpose.
Right.
And for me, it was like I don't want somebody else to bring up my children. I want to bring them up myself. It doesn't mean I have to be with them 24/7, but I need to be an influence in their lives at any rate. That's the bottom line. And so I quit, and that was when I became an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So
Um,
you have the same identity crisis that lawyers do, right?
oh yeah, I did. Yeah.
And I appreciate your sharing that because, sometimes I think, even though we're talking about business growth, I'm a lawyer and I help lawyers grow businesses. But the challenges that we face in this profession are really the uniquely human challenges, right?
Yes.
It's trying to create life in a way that works for you. And
Mhm.
you were sold a model of how life works,
Mhm.
and you did what you were supposed to do to become successful as
Yeah.
defined by others in that life. And that usually meant going to college, getting a degree, getting your job, moving up the corporate ladder, earning a certain amount of money. And then you said, no, I want to do it in my own space. And you essentially, for a lot of people, they will recreate the corporate environment they had somewhere else. They'll just recreate it with a different role for themselves. So I was very clear when I created the law firm that I wanted successful lawyers, but I didn't want to have a slavish existence. So I wasn't going to require 2,000 billable hours a year. I wasn't going to give only, 4 or 5 holidays a year, and the rest of the time was either unpaid time or time that had to be earned.
Mm.
I wanted to create a space where people could have a little bit of both. But I get a lot of both by virtue of being the owner because I'm taking more risk. And I got to be okay with that because I was making a model that worked for who I am. And so often we don't make those choices, right? We kind of we get to a point where others see us as successful even though we're not happy. So it takes a lot of bravery to walk away from that and say, I don't want this life anymore, even though it's making me money, even though it gives me the things that other people say I should want. And maybe even I want them to a certain degree, right? There are definitely people that get kind of stuck in the golden handcuffs.
Oh, yeah, the gilded cage.
Right. I don't want to walk away from 4, 5, 6, 700,000, dollars or pesos or whatever it is, right? You want to you want to have the best of both worlds. You don't always see the way to the best of both worlds, however, until you escape the world that you're in. And that's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, take that leap and just go for it. And I think in some instances, well, in fact, in nearly all instances, there has to be, there has to be a bit of a period of adjustment, where obviously the earnings are not going to be what they were before. I mean, that is typically how startups are, right? But you do it because it's an evolution and it's taking you to better places. And it's that ultimate destination, isn't it, that we all want, which is really to do with fulfillment, living our purpose, and just having a great life. So yeah, Allison, it's just been such a pleasure to speak to you tonight. I really have appreciated it. Of course, you're in New Jersey, so it's not tonight for you, is it? It's the afternoon, right?
Well, it's gray and dismal here, so it might as well be tonight. But it is late afternoon here.
Yeah. So love to hear how can people get hold of you if they want to speak to you about growing their own law practice?
Yeah. So anyone that's interested in what we do here at Law Firm Mentor can reach out to us on the web at lawfirmmentor.net. And I also tell people that if you're ever curious about how we help people, because, when I say coaching, a lot of people have the kind of glazed over look like, I don't know what that is. Are you going to give me the answers? Are you going to just ask me questions? There's a little bit of both that's involved in our model of helping people. You can learn all about that on our podcast, the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. And we're on all of the major platforms, Google, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, etc. So you can find out lots of information there and hear a little bit more about how we help lawyers to grow law firms and create the lives that they dream of.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much again, Allison, for sharing all of your wisdom and experience with us tonight. Really enjoyed interviewing you, and look forward to seeing you again soon and hearing more from you on social media and your podcast too.
Okay, thanks so much.
Bye-bye.